And then we forget how to take the armor off. And so we grow up and we don't have the ability to feel all the things that we need to feel. And I thought, well, okay.
Talk about it here and then we'll forget it ever happened. Emily is a changed woman in this movie. She drinks, she reflects, and she wants to inspire others to make changes in their lives because that's what truly matters. For me, that's why I'm in this business, to tell stories that move people. This case didn't just heat up, it completely changed shape. Instead of a dismissal, an official answer landed. A judge pulled a headline-grabbing deposition out of the spotlight, while a series of private messages slipped into public view. Suddenly, what once looked like a straightforward story about power on a film set has turned into a battle between two competing narratives, each accusing the other of spin. One side claims the production was hijacked by last-minute control moves and strike-time whispers, while the other insists the so-called smear campaign is nothing more than a cover for bruised egos and bad press. Buried in the court exhibits are the details that actually matter. Who approved what? When the rewrites happened, who knew about them? And how those decisions were sold to the crew? Careers, reputations, and serious money now hang on paperwork most people never bothered to read until now. If the filings keep peeling open like this, the court won't be judging vibes. It'll be weighing receipts. The real question isn't who shouted the loudest online, but whose version can survive a judge's scrutiny and a cold cross-check of timestamps. There are emails and text messages showing proof of exactly what Justin Baldoni's team has been doing to Blake Lively. And now, with the timeline ready to be wiped clean, we can unpack the messages everyone's quoting and the claims they're meant to prove. It all starts not in the courtroom, but with the movie itself. It Ends With Us hit theaters in August 2024 and immediately divided audiences. Huge box office numbers, but even louder whispers. Through the fall, industry chatter circled the same pressure points: creative control, approvals, and whether late changes crossed any ethical lines during the strike pause. By late December 2024, the quiet tension that had been simmering for months finally began to boil. Good morning and happy Saturday. It's 10:51 a.m. in Chicago, and the latest developments in the Blake Lively case are turning into something far more complex than anyone first imagined. What began as a routine entertainment dispute has now evolved into one of Hollywood's most scrutinized legal sagas, a blend of courtroom tension, leaked evidence, and a public hungry for answers. Blake Lively officially filed her complaint in federal court, centering her claims around harassment, retaliation, and reputational damage tied to the film's production. Her filing wasn't just a lawsuit, it was a declaration that she wouldn't allow what happened behind the scenes to stay buried there. By January 2025, the backlash had already taken shape. Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer wasted no time launching their counterattack, responding publicly with statements, press strategies, and eventually a high-stakes defamation suit that momentarily expanded the battlefield beyond the film set. Suddenly, what had started as a dispute over creative control was spilling into headlines, podcasts, and social media feeds worldwide. Fans, industry insiders, and journalists all became spectators to a modern media trial, one that blurred the line between storytelling and real-life scandal. As spring 2025 unfolded, the procedural tension escalated into something closer to warfare. Both sides began weaponizing what they had: text messages, emails, voice memos, and edit room chatter, each accusing the other of distorting the truth. The court filings became ammunition, and every new document felt like a chapter in an unfolding thriller. One side claimed manipulation and misconduct. The other claimed fabrication and narrative control. What united both, ironically, was how desperately they wanted to own the story. Then came the first major judicial reset. In early June 2025, the court dismissed Baldoni's defamation claims, effectively cutting the scope of the conflict in half and forcing the case to refocus on Lively's original allegations. The ruling was a quiet but powerful message from the bench. Stay focused, bring evidence, and stop treating the court like a stage. By late July, the attention turned back to Lively herself. She endured a marathon deposition lasting several days, fielding questions that probed everything from on-set behavior to contract details. Within days, snippets of the transcript leaked online. Comment sections erupted, pundits dissected every word, and social media spiraled into chaos. But just as quickly as the leaks spread, the court slammed the brakes. The full 292-page transcript vanished from the public docket. Accompanied by a strict judicial warning, the proceedings were not to become a public spectacle. The internet buzzed with speculation about what might have been said, but inside the court the message was discipline, not drama. A week later, in a move that shifted the case's trajectory, the defendants pivoted. Instead of fighting over technicalities or procedural loopholes, Wayfarer filed a formal answer, legal shorthand for, "We're ready to argue the facts, not just the paperwork." That single filing signaled a transformation in tone and strategy. It meant that the defense was no longer trying to erase the case, but was stepping into the arena to confront it head-on. It set the stage for the next phase: expert discovery, summary judgment briefings, and a trial tentatively scheduled for March 2026, a date already being circled on calendars across Hollywood and the press. The stakes were no longer abstract. Reputations, careers, and millions of dollars now hung in the balance. Threaded through this timeline are the flashpoints that continue to fuel public debate. Who approved the intimate content? Whether the strike-era rewrites happened as claimed, and which private messages truly hold legal weight once stripped of spin and context. Beneath those details lies something deeper, a story about perception, power, and the machinery of modern celebrity. Somewhere in all of this is someone who genuinely despises Blake Lively. It's not the internet. It's not the general public. It's someone close enough to the production to know exactly where to press. Filing an answer might seem procedural, but in high-profile litigation like this, it's a shift in posture, a psychological turning point. It stops being about whether the lawsuit should exist and becomes a fight over what actually happened. Inside that answer lies a roadmap of admissions, denials, and strategic phrasing, a document that reads as much like a screenplay as a legal brief. Every line is calculated, every word filtered through lawyers and PR strategists alike. It's not just about defending the narrative, it's about rewriting it. And as the public prepares for another wave of disclosures, one truth remains constant. This isn't about who wins the headlines. It's about who survives the evidence. Because in the end, the court won't be judging rumors' tone or emotion. It will be judging receipts. Undisputed dates and professional roles are acknowledged, but everything else is either contested or carefully reframed. The defense holds back a reserve of arguments and procedural tools for later use, keeping the core of their case flexible. Meanwhile, social media has turned the concept of a smear campaign into its own ecosystem, with lawyers on TikTok dissecting what defamation really means, often without access to the filings themselves. That single document, the formal answer, opens the door to the next phase of litigation, the part that truly matters: discovery. This is where evidence takes over and storytelling gives way to data. Every message, email, script draft, edit note, call sheet, intimacy coordination form, guild compliance letter, and version history becomes a potential exhibit. Anything that can be time-stamped, linked to a decision, or traced to an approval is now fair game. At this stage, metadata outweighs any viral narrative. What matters isn't who trends or who posts the cleverest thread. It's who clicked approve, who sent the late-night text, and when a revision was made. Those digital footprints will carry far more weight than any public statement. Choosing to answer rather than dismiss is also a clear strategic signal. It says that the defense believes the paper trail will speak louder than procedural technicalities. It's a declaration of confidence, a belief that the documents themselves will protect them better than motions ever could. This choice points toward what's likely coming: summary judgment. That's the stage where a judge can rule on certain claims purely from written evidence and sworn testimony, bypassing trial altogether if no genuine dispute exists about the key facts. Timing then becomes critical. A rewrite completed before a strike window carries one implication. One finished during a production pause carries another entirely. If any approval for a campaign, leak, or reputation management effort against Blake Lively can be tied to the right person, the argument narrows sharply. If it can't, the scope widens. Suddenly, everyone with a digital footprint near the production becomes fair game. And when someone claims reputational harm or retaliation, the court doesn't weigh vibes or media noise. It looks for concrete before and after evidence. What changed, who acted, and what traceable decisions led to measurable damage. Expect the guardrails of a high-profile federal case to engage as discovery unfolds. Protective orders shielding private material, motions to limit what the jury can see, and endless debates about what constitutes sensitive evidence. Expert witnesses will likely be called to translate the language of metadata, creative workflows, and guild compliance for the court, ensuring that jurors understand what normal looks like on a film set when everyone actually follows the rules. In parallel, online speculation refuses to slow down. Some fans even wonder aloud if Taylor Swift has referenced the situation indirectly, a reminder of how the case has seeped into pop culture consciousness. But beneath all the noise, the real story is about how professional environments, film sets, edit rooms, approval chains, are supposed to function when contracts, ethics, and industry standards are honored. From that foundation, both sides now begin trimming the excess, excluding exhibits, narrowing testimony, and fighting over what evidence is legally admissible until only the core, verifiable facts remain. In essence, filing an answer pulls the entire dispute out of the arena of speculation and into the domain of proof. Moving forward, the side that grounds its narrative in precise timestamps, digital logs, and documented authority will have the upper hand.
I'm not saying
Theatrics
that
will
everything
fade.
we've learned is toxic.
Evidence will remain.
Okay?
Now the real
I'm not saying
work
there's anything
begins,
inherently wrong with you or
parsing
me.
through the messages and edit room chatter that have dominated every headline, separating what might sway a verdict from what simply updates the timeline. The screenshots making the rounds online feel explosive because they capture the atmosphere after midnight. Short exchanges, clipped tones, the kind of terse professionalism that reveals tension beneath the surface. It's in those fragments, the hurried edits, the quietly approved revisions, the timestamps no one thought would ever matter, that the next chapter of this case will be written. The thread generating the most noise online doesn't read like gossip anymore. It feels more like a tug of war over authority, a quiet but fierce battle about who had the final say on creative control. Who dictated how intimate scenes were framed? Who could pull a shot from the final cut, and who could demand another pass in the edit room? That's the reason it keeps circulating. It's not scandal for scandal's sake. It's about power, authorship, and accountability. Some believe Taylor Swift's upcoming album subtly references her friendship breakup with Blake Lively, but anyone following this case closely knows that those lyrics don't prove anyone's character. What they do reflect, however, is how far this story has stretched into pop culture. At its core, it's not about personalities, it's about process. The messages and documents being passed around don't reveal who's good or bad. They map who held authority as the film It Ends With Us was pieced together, scene by scene, edit by edit. On the defense side, a massive compilation has emerged. A meticulous timeline built from texts, emails, calendar notes, and fragments of call sheets. It's a deliberate effort to turn scattered evidence into one coherent narrative. The purpose is clear: to replace rumors of a whisper campaign with the dull but powerful weight of routine. Stacked together, these records are designed to show that the production followed standard workflows, approvals, revisions, conversations that happen on every set, every day. The defense strategy is tangible, organized, and highly disciplined. Transform what looks like chaos into normalcy. And yet that very structure is where the tension lives. Why do approvals matter? Why do timestamps matter? Because in litigation, structure is everything. Judges aren't moved by drama. They look for documentation that explains conduct without relying on conspiracy. Every text, every note, every emoji suddenly becomes a clue. One-to-one exchanges, polite, friendly, or even affectionate, are being reinterpreted as potential gotchas. But that's a double-edged sword. Friendly messages don't cancel a later complaint, and frustrated private remarks don't automatically equal public defamation. What actually matters is the context. Where does each message fall on the calendar? Was there a contract change that week? A cut delivered to the studio? A new intimacy note issued before a scene? Because messages without anchors are just vibes. Screenshots are not proof until they live in a filing, dated, sourced, and verified. And yet, social media continues to swirl with group chat captures stamped with bold-faced names, exploding across feeds with little verification. They might look like fireworks, but without the legal fuse, a date, a sender, a custodian. They're just sparks in the dark. Courts don't care how viral something went. They care about authentication. They care whether the full thread tells the same story as the cropped screenshot. So what do these messages really change? Two things. First, they outline the chain of command. Who could greenlight a rewrite, pause a reshoot, or demand an intimacy adjustment? Second, they tie every decision to a timestamp, and that's where things get volatile. A text bragging, "We fixed the scene," means one thing if it happened before a labor pause, and something completely different if it occurred during one. Timing isn't just detail, it's motive. It's leverage. That timing is also the fuse for the next explosion. It's what keeps reigniting the debate with each new leak or filing. One camp argues that crucial pages were quietly rewritten during a strike window, giving one side an unfair hand over tone and intimacy beats. The other insists those rewrites happened earlier, under normal approvals, with full transparency. Two claims, two timelines, one word that can make or break reputations: scab. It's not just an insult. In Hollywood, it's a rule-bound accusation that draws a line between professional and violation. And so, the It Never Ends saga edges toward its next act. A case that's less about who said what, and more about when, where, and under whose authority. Same facts. Different dates? Two competing truths that can't coexist. Because in this courtroom drama, the calendar isn't background, it's the script. A rewrite completed during a strike pause reads as cutting the line, while one finished beforehand looks like nothing more than routine polish on a messy production. That single distinction, timing, is what both sides are now fighting to define. Every calendar entry, draft name, version number, email header, delivery stamp, and even the metadata buried deep inside a PDF has become evidence. Both teams are combing through what they call calendar crumbs. The digital fingerprints left behind by ordinary workflow, now transformed into the backbone of a federal case. The It Ends With Us saga, ironically titled, seems to be nearing its own ending. And fittingly, it ends with Taylor Swift echoing through the conversation. But metadata doesn't care about headlines, celebrity, or public sentiment. It doesn't bend to opinion. It only tells the truth of time. It records when a file was created, who opened it next, and when the changes occurred. That's why timing has become the true storyteller here. If those pages were moved during a strike pause, the hostage production narrative, that creative control was weaponized under pressure, gains credibility. It suggests approvals made in haste, power wielded like a wrench rather than a pen. But if the pages predate the pause, the defense's version takes hold, a story of a standard rewrite, a routine cleanup, and complaints surfacing only after edits bruised egos. Both sides swear their version is the truth, and neither can rely on a single spicy text to prove it. The real evidence lies elsewhere, in version histories, guild compliance letters, edit logs, and the question of who actually controlled the final cut when the notes were applied. There's a nuance here that's often lost in the noise. Rewrites aren't just words on a page. They create ripples that touch every corner of production. Change a rooftop scene and the dominoes fall. Stunt coordination, intimacy coverage, safety briefings, and how the editor shapes the emotional aftermath. That's why the people in those late-night edit bay messages sound sharp, even bitter. They're not just arguing about art. They're arguing about logistics, liability, and the endless paperwork that underpins it all. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni are locked in deposition sessions, a process less glamorous than it sounds. If a date stamp pins a revision inside a restricted window, expect that exhibit to be waved like a flag by Lively's team. If it lands outside, the defense response is simple. Industry standard. Simple. Industry standard. Clips can be edited into anything, framed for any agenda, and cut down until outrage becomes entertainment. But the court isn't in the business of producing viral content. It wants the whole transcript. Judges weigh every word against the larger tapestry of documents, timelines, contracts, and sworn statements, not against a 1-minute social clip designed for clicks. When a deposition morphs into a headline machine, the justice system begins to wobble. Judges worry about tainted jurors, intimidated witnesses, and a courtroom turned into a stage for trending hashtags. Pulling the transcript off the public docket wasn't censorship, it was calibration. It was the court saying, in no uncertain terms, save the theater for trial. Even unseen, you can feel the tension pulsing beneath those sealed pages. Direct accusations of a coordinated smear were met with calm, rehearsed denials. It played like a thriller, except this time the dialogue was real. Taylor Swift's name floated into the narrative unexpectedly, a cameo no one saw coming, almost playfully, as when she seemed to be winking at the situation during her New Heights episode reading. But inside that same transcript, lawyers pressed forward with sharper questions. Who approved what and when? Were warnings raised? Did the online narratives circulating in real time actually match the internal emails and production notes behind the scenes? None of those fragments prove anything in isolation. What will matter later is far simpler and far more damning if misaligned. Do the sworn answers in that room match the time-stamped messages, the version histories, the signatures that built the paper trail? If they do, one side gains leverage. If not, the cross-examination practically writes itself. The judge knows this. Expect tighter guardrails from here on out. Protective orders that fence off sensitive exhibits. Filings that reference evidence without ever exposing the raw files themselves. Transparency gives way to containment. Meanwhile, in the background, Blake Lively's Instagram activity told its own quiet story. Several posts vanished overnight. Whether that's coincidence or strategy, only the teams involved know. But in a climate this charged, every deletion becomes a breadcrumb. And when excerpts from sealed materials suddenly appear online, the safest assumption is always the same. Context is missing, deliberately or otherwise. Courts notice that too. When a filing reads more like a press release than a legal document, the bench treats it as theater, not testimony. The message is unmistakable. The judge has officially shrunk the stage. From this point on, what moves the needle isn't who wins the internet with a viral quote from page 187. It's whose testimony actually survives contact with the evidence. The next phase pulls us into the orbit everyone's been circling. The Taylor Swift connection, the blurred line between pop culture myth and legal fact. Online, speculation spread like wildfire that Blake Lively had been caught on tape discussing how she maneuvered for control behind the scenes. But that's the tricky thing about narratives. Fan fiction bleeds into fact faster than anyone can correct it. Anytime Taylor Swift's name brushes against a courtroom filing, the internet treats it like a loyalty test. Was she a silent witness? A friend in the loop? Or just another name in a thread taken out of context? The sober truth is far less cinematic. If her messages exist in this case at all, they're locked behind protective orders, buried under redactions, and debated only in hushed legal language about scope and privilege. That doesn't make her a witness, and it doesn't make her a villain. It just means that even high-profile friends text like the rest of us. And sometimes those texts land in a discovery log beside far more consequential evidence. That's the reality of this case. Fame magnifies everything but clarifies nothing. The proximity between Lively's edits, approvals, and public timing creates the illusion of conspiracy. When in court, it often collapses back into ordinary context, a coincidence inflated into plot by algorithms that prefer chaos over clarity. Two currents are now colliding in the public feed. One is fan lore, spinning lyrics into affidavits and podcast jokes into sworn testimony. The other is the docket, the cold ledger of dates, custodians, and chain of custody documents that judges actually read. The first current is entertaining, sticky, and tailor-made for social media. The second is tedious, procedural, and quietly decisive. Only one of them matters when rulings are made. If a limited set of communications between Lively and Swift even makes it into evidence, it won't be to arbitrate friendship or morality. It will be to anchor facts. Who knew what and when? That's why you won't see a parade of subpoenas or a media circus. Courts prefer quiet accuracy to noisy spectacle, especially when the celebrity at the edge of the story isn't central to the claims. There's a rhythm to how this all leaks into public consciousness. A caption becomes a clue becomes a receipt, and by the time it hits your feed, it's presented as a verdict with a soundtrack. But the truth isn't found in captions or compilations. It lives in documents, in the evidence that answers the only questions the court truly cares about. Because in the end, none of this will hinge on who trended. It will hinge on who told the truth, and who has the paper trail to prove it. It was almost poetic timing. Great for Taylor Swift, whose announcement broke the internet. And then, just an hour later, Ryan Reynolds quietly posted on Instagram. No caption war, no overt reference, but everyone felt the ripple. In this ecosystem, timing is commentary. Each post becomes a cipher for allegiance. Yet while fans dissect emojis, the court dissects evidence, timestamps, approvals, authority. Who held control over sensitive scenes? Whether rewrites occurred inside or outside union guardrails? Whether public narratives matched private timelines? Those are the questions that actually matter. Inside this video, the rules are simple. Fan theories make for entertaining chapters, but paper changes cases. If a judge admits even a fraction of those messages into the record, they'll be treated like any other exhibit, stamped, indexed, and weighed against contracts. Not as cliffhangers about pop royalty, but as evidence of process. From here on, the case stops rewarding hot takes and starts rewarding calendars. The irony is rich. The so-called male feminist nearly taken down by one. Justin Baldoni has built his brand on empathy, yet the same sensitivity he championed may become his undoing in Discovery, because the next revelations won't arrive as cryptic captions or cropped screenshots. They'll appear as PDFs with dates, headers, and signatures. The next royal tale isn't hidden in lyrics, it's buried in filings. And first comes the grind. Endless document production, emails, texts, cut lists, safety paperwork, intimacy coordination logs, script revision histories, guild compliance letters, every file a breadcrumb. If either side drags its feet or redacts too heavily, motions to compel follow, dull to read, devastating in impact. Those rulings quietly determine what the jury will actually see and what remains sealed forever. Then comes expert season, the industry's version of a chess match. Blake Lively reportedly endured a tense showdown with opposing counsel during her deposition. Terse exchanges, long pauses, moments that lawyers replay like game tape. But that's just the prelude. Both sides are now assembling industry veterans to translate the chaos of filmmaking into courtroom language. Who usually controls edits? How are intimacy protocols structured? What qualifies as a routine rewrite versus an overreach? These experts matter because they turn gray areas into binary ones, questions a judge can actually answer. And before any of them testify, comes the gauntlet of Doe-Bear challenges, motions to exclude experts before their opinions ever reach a jury. If an expert is disqualified, entire theories evaporate overnight. After that, the spotlight shifts to summary judgment. Dense briefs asking the judge to decide certain claims purely from the record. This is the legal equivalent of cutting the trailer before the movie. Everything that survives will make it to trial. Everything else fades into footnotes. Here, timestamps and approvals either align perfectly or they don't. When they do, leverage builds. When they don't, the case splinters. If major claims fall at this stage, settlement talks spike. Everyone pretends they never wanted a trial anyway. If the claims survive, the energy hardens. The real preparation begins. Exhibit lists, motions to exclude prejudicial material, witness outlines mapping which messages, edits, and scenes each side will call decisive. And somewhere, in the background noise of fandom and fatigue, another whisper appears. New text messages released. Screenshots circulate. The internet spins. But for those inside the case, those PDFs aren't gossip. They're ammunition. Two wild cards remain, even for those who hate PDFs. The first is procedural. Will the judge narrow the case further before trial, or let it breathe into a full-blown spectacle? The second is cultural. Can any celebrity truly separate narrative control from public perception once discovery becomes content? Because here in the overlap between fame and law, everyone's story is evidence, and every timestamp is a trap. One major wild card in this case is the unsealing process. That delicate moment when a protective order loosens its grip and documents once buried behind sealed filings spill into daylight. A single exhibit, an email chain, a contract draft, even a casual text can reset the entire public narrative in a single afternoon. What was once rumor suddenly becomes record, but that's only half the danger. The other wild card is sanctions risk. Courts have little patience for theatrics, discovery games, or orchestrated leaks meant to sway headlines before a hearing. And when a judge's warning turns into a rebuke from the bench, it doesn't just bruise public relations, it reshapes leverage at the negotiation table. Power shifts in silence, usually behind chambers' doors, long before the next filing hits the docket. In the simplest terms, the side that anchors its version of events to verifiable data, emails, draft histories, time-stamped chains of authority, and consistent testimony will slowly start winning quiet victories before a jury is ever seated. The rest is background noise. Courtroom stories don't end in fiery closing speeches or press statements. They end on spreadsheets and exhibits that measure what changed in the real world, in actual dollars, tied to specific decisions made on specific days. Once the case reaches the damages phase, emotion gives way to arithmetic. Lawyers begin by reconstructing the before picture, what deals were on the table, what brand partnerships were pending, what production bonuses or back-end points were projected, and what future opportunities seemed certain before the blow-ups began. Then they compare it to the after picture, a colder landscape of paused deals, dropped sponsors, and evaporated goodwill. And yet, hovering over every line item is the elephant in the room, the smear campaign. Was it organic outrage or a carefully seeded strategy? The filings hint at both. Behind the viral moments are questions about what fell through, who suddenly backed away, and which projects quietly slid off a production slate without fanfare. The evidence that matters won't be dramatic monologues. It'll be emails from agents, amended term sheets, and text messages reading, "We're going in a different direction." That's where causation lives, the invisible thread tying an online whisper to $1 million loss. But even then, the defense will argue what every studio veteran already knows. Bad press is part of the business. You can't call every negative headline defamation. To prove reputational harm, you have to isolate the noise, separate normal turbulence from targeted sabotage, and show a measurable hit that flows directly from a leak, a post, or an editing room decision. That's where timestamps do the heavy lifting. A deal memo on Monday, a viral thread on Tuesday, a cancellation on Wednesday. Lay that out chronologically, and suddenly patterns emerge. The defense will counter with the chaos theory of Hollywood. Box office trends, scheduling conflicts, fatigue from prior controversies. They'll insist it's just coincidence. The plaintiffs will try to stitch a clean before and after line, showing the court not just a change in perception, but a shift in hard numbers. And running parallel to all of it is mitigation, the question of what the affected party did to stop the financial bleeding. Courts expect action. If income dried up, did you sign with new reps? Seek new roles? Pivot brands? Launch a press reset? If not, the damages number drops. Meanwhile, behind the curtain, the machinery that actually decides who wins or folds hums along quietly. Completion bonds, insurance clauses, guild penalties, indemnities, and moral clause exposure. None of this trends on social media. Yet it's what determines how far each side can push before the calculator says, settle. That's why the dullest sounding parts of discovery, agent calendars, revision logs, brand safety emails, carry so much weight. They aren't just paperwork. They're the backbone of accountability. In the end, this case won't be decided by who dominates the headlines or trends longer on Twitter. It will come down to who can prove a chain of truth that runs unbroken from a decision maker to a document to a dollar lost. Break that chain and the claim collapses. Prove it and the check grows. When those numbers crystallize, the posturing fades. People stop grandstanding and start horse trading. The noise evaporates. And that's the quiet irony of it all. The louder the internet yells, the more the truth retreats into spreadsheets and exhibits. In the end, the court won't grade emotions. It will weigh paper. So when you set the headlines aside and line up the receipts on a calendar, ask yourself, whose story still stands without you rooting for it? Stands without you